Okay, so hi everyone. I'm Swati Garg. I'm the founder and CEO of Milo Associates. We focus in customer success and professional services recruitment. We are so excited to have you here today for our Talent One Success Magnified webinar. I'll share a little bit more about us and me, and then introduce our wonderful speaker and our topic today, and then kind of give her the reins. Miranda, can you please give me the next slide?
Yes.
Awesome. So we have been around for a little over 7.5 years. We're national, and we do all levels of hiring with individual contributors, middle management, and executive search. Focuses that in SaaS and tech. We love what we do, and we're really involved in the CS community. If you have any questions or you just want to get in touch, please let me know. On a personal front, I just love creating things. I created my own brand last year. I'm really focused on taking action and moving things forward. Feel free to check out my site, swatigarg.com, if you're curious. But we're so excited to give you a lens from the talent perspective, speaking with amazing CS and professional services leaders in our series. And I'm so excited to have part 2 of our communication series today with Miranda. I reached out to her to specifically talk about her digital presence. I think we all can attest to how amazing her presence is on social, on LinkedIn. Great stories, great advice, great nuggets. She's always helping people. And I know that's taken a lot of time to build. And it's very intentional. And I really wanted to learn about it. And I wanted her to share her story. So I invited her today to talk about it, and she so graciously said yes. So thank you so much, Miranda, for being here today. We are so excited to talk about the topic, and I'm gonna give it to you.
Yeah, no, thank you. And thank you again for having me. And thank you to those who have taken their time out of their day today to join for this webinar. As you all know, you're here with me and Swati. We are going to talk about powering your voice with your digital presence. I'm Maranda Dziekonski, and I have an intro slide in a minute, so I'm not going to go into all that here. But right now, more than ever, having a strong digital presence is probably one of the most important things you can do to grow your career. And we're going to go into a few things today. One, of course, touching upon the importance of building your brand. Talking a little bit about how to get started. And for those of you who have already gotten started, hopefully maybe you'll take a few little tips here and there from me on how you can maybe amplify that. And then after we go through that, kind of just a now what. But before we get started, for those that don't know me, I'm Maranda Dziekonski. I am the Senior Vice President of Customer Success, and I also have operations now at Datasembly. I'm also a fractional COO. And what probably makes me a little different than other CS leaders is I'm probably more of an operations leader. I have owned HR, Biz Ops, finance, sales, marketing, and various other functions in startups. I am on my ninth startup now. And I've been part of 4 companies that have had exits. Some you may have heard of, others you may have not. The ones that I will mention here are Lending Club, which I was an early team member there. We had a unicorn IPO. HelloSign was acquired by Dropbox. It's now called Dropbox Sign. And I was also at Swiftly for 4 years, where I went through my first ever PE acquisition. So we had JMI Equity, who did the majority acquisition from the team members there. So I conducted a quick survey on LinkedIn just to get a pulse overall where everyone is with their digital presence, how they feel about their online presence. And it seems like we all agree, the majority of us, even myself included, feels like we could do better. Not to worry. Hopefully today you're going to walk away with some tips on how to get started or how to improve. So why does this matter? So I'm going to share a story here, share a little story of why this mattered for me. And hopefully this can be a cautionary tale to many of you out there. And some of you that know me well probably already know this story. But in 2022, after 4 successful years at Swiftly, I made a decision it was time to move on and start looking for my next role. And I had been building up my network for years, giving to it and seldomly calling on anyone to ask for anything in return. So this was my time to reach out and ask my network if they knew any great places that were looking for CS or operations leaders. What happened next kind of blew my mind. I had various CEOs from CS tools and productivity tools reach out to their networks, PE, private equity investors, VCs that I'd partner with, other leaders in the space, all pinging out their networks. And I ended up having conversations with 39 companies. I had a spreadsheet going on, trying to figure out, was there a good mutual fit? And I was interviewing for roles, everything from a turnaround CEO, COO, head of CS, VP of CS, everything in between. And I ended up with 14 final companies and moved forward with one that really moved me and aligned with my personal and professional goals. And this is where I wish I could say, and I lived happily ever after. And this will also speak to the power of building a strong network and having a strong online presence. Um, so things did not play out well at the org that I took the role with. After joining, I quickly discovered that we had some pretty major financial issues. And I led that company through 2 rounds of very painful layoffs and actually made the decision to leave there from my full-time role and switch to a fractional COO role while trying to figure out what my next move was going to be. Um, I really remember the embarrassment I felt when I had to make that decision to reach back out to my network and say, hey, I made a mistake and I'm back on the market again. But my network did not like even bat an eyelash. And within just a few weeks, I had a PE firm who made an introduction to the CEO of the company that I am now at. And the rest is kind of history. And now you could say I am living my happily ever after here at Datasembly, at least since August of last year. So this is just the testament to the power of having strong networks. But not only does this story matter for, you know, that reason, there are a few more reasons I call out on this slide. Career advancement, improving your visibility and exposure, learning and development. I learned so much from you all. It's what really keeps my ideas fresh, and helps me and challenges me to think of new and innovative ways to lead operations, lead customer success teams, and so on and so forth. Um, if I had not, though, been investing in my network, sharing content, going to events, reaching out, interacting over the past 10 years, I know for a fact that my path to finding my next opportunity would have been much more difficult. But let's just talk about some of the less obvious reasons. Um, Building, growing, and sharing with your network is really great for your self-confidence as well. Not to mention friendships and relationships you make along the way. I know so many folks from interacting with others on LinkedIn at conferences, at meetups, and other events. And lastly, I just want to call out helping others is a really, really big reason that I share on LinkedIn. It's just, I believe, good karma to help others out as much as you can. And I believe we all should strive to do that. Before we hop into some do's and don'ts, I wanted to share 2 important statistics. And hopefully this isn't too surprising, but if it is, hopefully it's motivating for those, especially that are on the job market or will be on the job market in the next year or two, to really get out there and invest in your network. Networking is responsible for filling 85% of open roles. I believe this, especially in times like this when you open up a open requisition and you see on LinkedIn alone, it's been open for 8 hours and has 1,000 applicants, right? How do you make yourself stand out and how do you help yourself get into that conversation? It's generally through who you know and not what you know. And 7 out of 10 jobs are not posted. I know this personally. I have filled a couple of roles, one recently without ever even posting it. It's directly through my network, directly through me pinging folks that have stood out to me on LinkedIn through either their content, their interactions, or getting referrals from people through LinkedIn that I trust. I know folks are always cautious around connecting with strangers on LinkedIn. I'm here to tell you some of the closest professional relationships and personal friendships I now have come from me connecting with a stranger on LinkedIn and growing and developing those relationships over the years. I'm not saying blindly connect with everyone that sends you a connection request, but definitely be open to connecting with folks that are in the same industry or role you're in. Um, I do also want to call out that networks are not set it and forget it. They take time. Make sure you are blocking out time every single day to comment on a few posts, share something valuable, whether it's you reposting somebody else's post or a link to an article that you found helpful, or even getting your own content. Pardon me. Make a point to share out and invest and develop those relationships. I am a very busy person. I sit in 10 to 15 meetings a day, not kidding. But I make sure I take time to reply to every comment on my post. Pardon me one second. I'm sure I miss some sometimes, but I do make a point to attempt to interact with anyone that is gracious enough to take the time to comment on one of my posts or interact with me. Um, the next couple of things I just want to call out is, do not write about stuff that you're not an expert in. I see people do this a lot. See people writing about responsibilities they've never owned, and I know them personally, or I know, from their history that they've never owned these responsibilities. It is best to stick to areas that you know well. Build a name for yourself in the areas that you know super well, where you can go deep. And the last call out I want to call out, and I wish I didn't have to call this out, but is to not copy others' content without giving credit or asking for permission. I know this is obvious, but I've personally had some folks content copy my content verbatim and add a couple of sentences and repost it. I just want to tell you our community is small. So it's a really quick way to hurt your professional brand online. So try as hard as you can to be original, be authentic, and create content that is true to who you are. I have said this for years and years and years and years. You could probably go back to podcast I was on in 2015, 2016, telling people to invest in your network before you need it. Um, it is much easier to reach out to folks that you have been giving to or investing in and asking for help than it is just to come out of the woodwork and say, "Will you help me?" Um, People are busy and never mind helping. They don't mind helping others, but investing and putting some capital in your bank with them always goes a long way. um, I do want to say putting yourself out there doesn't come without some risks. So a few I just call out here is privacy. If the more publicly you make yourself available, the more people will know about you. So it's just something to be super cognizant of and figure out where you draw that line. Trolls, yes, they exist. I felt like I made it the first time I had a troll. And I quickly remedied it, but it's definitely part of it. Control of your content. I talked about it a little bit before about others, gaining access to your content and possibly resharing it as their own. That is a risk. Burnout. I do have times where I will sit down to write on Sunday. I block out some time to try to write content, and I'm so tired. I have no more original thoughts to give. So I'll take a little bit of a break, but it is something people should be aware of. Burnout can be a real thing. Next thing, just make sure if you are sharing copyrighted content, that you're just mindful about the legalities around sharing copyrighted content. I'm not a lawyer, but it's just a good thing to always be cognizant of. Lastly, I just want to call out it's okay to have fun. I don't always post about leadership, startups, and CS. While that is a core of what I do share and what I do post, I will also share little tidbits about my personal life or do something fun every now and again. We definitely don't want to make LinkedIn or other professional platforms Facebook, but I personally feel more connected to folks that are relatable as humans. So I personally try to balance things out, but I do urge you all to do whatever makes you comfortable. But here is an example of a post I did just a couple of days ago to kind of prove my point, that people do like to interact with content that's not 100% business related. And I will say the contents in this post are pretty entertaining. And I was very shocked at how many of you recline your seats on airplanes. That's all I'm saying. I was very shocked. Um, so now what? You're probably thinking, great, now what, Miranda? What do I do next? Look, there's no time like the present just to get out there and get started. And if you're already started, I have a few things that I would suggest you do. Thing one is I have a spreadsheet that I keep up all the time that is like Miranda's writing topics. People send me direct messages all the time on LinkedIn asking me questions about how do you do this or how would you approach that. I tend to answer them directly, but then I add it to my writing list of things that maybe others could benefit from this information. So I have a writing list. Next, I create a schedule of the content that I'm going to post. I suggest starting, if you're not already doing this, with a minimum of 3 posts a week. That's what the algorithm experts say, 3 to 5 posts a week can help you get into the flow and get into the algorithm. Um, I do write my content in advance and then I schedule it out. Historically, I used Buffer, but now LinkedIn has a really great scheduling tool. So in early December, I had a spine surgery, and I even scheduled out post for while I was in surgery and the day after and the day after and the day after. So my LinkedIn content kept going even when I was just recovering. And I was a little bit set it and forget it. You can, start where you're the most comfortable with. And an easy way to get started is just commenting on others' posts and also sharing others' content with just maybe a little bit of commentary. Um, it I want also to encourage people to not get discouraged if you are already sharing content and you're not getting traction. My early post, sometimes I would get a like and sometimes I wouldn't. I've had posts now that have gone upwards of 750,000 to 1 million views, and then some days I get barely any traction. Here's Here's how I have managed that. In the beginning, it was definitely a dopamine hit when I would get a like. I'm like, "Ooh, somebody liked it. Ooh, somebody liked it." But I had to recenter my why around I was doing it to really find that mental health balance. And really, all I do now is instead of focusing on how much interaction, how much engagement is, if it's helping somebody, if it helps at least one person, I'm happy with that. Um, I don't do this for monetary gain. I'm not making any money on this. So I keep myself centered in knowing that the content I create is for me, my personal portfolio, and maybe it's helpful to a few others. And that makes me happy if it is. All right. Swati, this is where come back in, and I know you have a list of questions, but we'll also take other questions. Um, and we'll go from there. And do you want me to stop sharing my screen?
Yes, please.
Some.
Thank you. That was so helpful. You answered so many of my questions. I was wondering how, like a lot on the emotional aspect, burnout, I felt it. I've been doing this for a couple years now, and I'm definitely had moments where I'm like, I don't know what to say. And so I really appreciate you talking about some of those things. And I definitely want to ask more questions. I have some questions that I want to ask that I have, but definitely, please, if you have questions, please, I encourage you, put it in the chat, but I encourage you to ask some Q&A. We have time to pick Miranda's brain and, take advantage of it. But I'm going to start with a few questions in our fireside chat here before we go to Q&A. So the first question I had for you, Miranda, was, well, you talked about this, right? But how has harnessing your digital presence positively impacted your career trajectory, right? Not just being able to find an amazing role, when you needed it, but in general.
Yeah. Ah, I have made so many professional connections and now friendships by doing this over the years that I have my tribe, I have my noodling partners. It's our roles are not easy. No, folks, I don't care what level you're at, every day you're encountering moments where you have to make decisions or figure stuff out, especially in early stage startups that you've never done before, right? Or maybe never encountered before. And having that tribe of people that I can ping a question to, or do you have a moment to hop on so I can brainstorm with you, has been a huge growth multiplier for me over the years. Having access to folks that, earlier in my career that were way further along in their career than me, um, they could see around corners that I hadn't been around yet was just a massive impact
Yeah.
for me. So that is the first one I would say. Um, the second is the emotional support alone. When
Mm,
I was going through difficult times with the last company where I was leading through layoffs. There were a handful of folks in the tech community and CS community that would text me just to make sure I was doing okay. And knowing that I had them there for emotional support made it way less lonely when
mhm.
I was going through those difficult moments. And I highly suggest now all the folks that, and this breaks my heart. I know some folks out there that have been trying to find their next role for a year. Um, you know, Having those people in your squad just to have that emotional support is while it may not feel like it, it's a growth multiplier for you in the long run.
Yeah, I mean that's amazing. I think I completely agree. I mean, having support from people that kind of know what you're going through that are in your space means so much because it's so relatable, right? Like they
Yeah.
actually understand how you feel. And I think friends and family are amazing, but having peers understand and give you that support, it just kind of hits different. So I think that's fantastic.
Yeah.
Can you share a specific instance where building your brand online played a crucial role that gave you an opportunity, like professional opportunity, maybe a little bit more earlier in your career or
Uh,
mid-career?
yeah, so I was tapped to interview so I was a VP of CS at HelloSign, and I had been there 3 years, and I built out, I mean, CS, professional services, tech support, API support, engineering. Like I had something like 6 or 7 teams that I had built and were under me, and I also owned like receivables and stuff
Oh,
like that.
wow.
And I was tapped on my LinkedIn by somebody that was trying to fill a COO role. And I'm like, is this real? Is this real life? Like, because I was a newer VP. I had just achieved VP at HelloSign a couple years before then. Now, I did end up leaving HelloSign to go to that role. That company went under, but it was such a tremendous experience for me because while I had previously owned, recruiting and some tidbits of HR, as most people in early stage startups do, this was the
Yeah.
first time I owned everything but engineering and product, everything.
Wow.
And like they found me because my online presence and my speaking around San Francisco. I used to speak at a lot of meetups, and like San Francisco had a very, very tight community pre-COVID. So your name would get surfaced as somebody should talk to. So that alone, that was really early in my career.
Wow, that's amazing. Okay, thank you. But like keep your questions coming, guys. I feel the Q&A is blowing up. I'm so excited. We're gonna get there in a couple minutes. So what strategies do you employ to communicate effectively and authentically through your digital channels?
Well, one, I I try to, well, this is going to sound crazy, but I view myself as a simple farm girl that grew up in rural Michigan, who, was a young single mom and just happened to land a really, in a lucky space to grow my career. So when I write, I try to write just as human as possible. And you won't see me using big words that somebody would have to Google. I try to keep it just plain language, relatable. You don't see me writing these massive long posts. Occasionally, if I have something big I want to get out, I
Mhm.
will. But I bullet point, I write the way my brain thinks.
Yeah.
Simple language, bullet points, easy to consume.
So,
I see folks out there, and I think this is a big mistake, trying to make themselves look super smart by using words that are not just common language that people are like, what does this mean?
yeah.
Um, it it may work for some folks, but for me, I just keep it super simple and it seems to work better. I want people to be able to take away something that they can use in their day-to-day life, whether it's a leadership trick or a way to think about CS or a way to think about startups. And I keeping it simple is how I try to approach it.
Yeah, no, I love that. I think it's actually really challenging to bring complex thoughts and ideas and simplifying them. So I think it actually takes more time to do what you're doing. And I love that. I'm also a person of very simple language. I think that it just goes further. And because your content is so versatile, which I also love, is it's obviously a lot about CS leadership, but it's also a lot about like your personal life and how you grew up and like things you've learned. And I think it's so relatable, and you don't want complicated words for that. You're like watching and listening a story. So I love it. I love that. How do you balance maintaining a strong online presence while like making sure it's authentic in your personal brand? And I may have just said a little bit about that, but
I mean, quite frankly, I just try to write from the heart
yeah.
and respond from the heart. I Look, I'm a real human too, so occasionally you'll see me say like shit or something online, right? I just try to just be who I am. I am never trying and ever have tried to be someone I'm not. Never talk about something I don't know anything about. And I've always been very, very mindful of where I am an expert and where I'm not. I do seek to fill those gaps of where I'm not an expert to continue to learn and grow. But I would never pretend to be an expert in something I've never done. So.
Awesome. Thank you. And I'm going to ask one more question before we go to the Q&A. Um, what advice would you give to someone looking to enhance their online presence and build a standout personal brand?
Well, really like ground yourself in your why. Um, Doing it just to have a brand to me is a bad reason to do it. Um, Doing it to serve others is a great reason. That's the reason I've rooted myself in. It's okay if you're doing it to make sure, you're securing your future, like that's smart. But make
Mhm.
sure you're also rooted in something that's more than I just want to be famous, right? Um, I personally, uh, I personally think you'll feel more passion about it if you
Mhm.
feel like you're giving back and you're helping others. At least that's me. So.
Yeah, I love that. I think that's really great advice. Thank you. So, kind of going to the Q&A, loving these questions. So the first one we have here, how do you feel about content that is written by your company for employees to share? You mentioned authentic content being important, so I'm interested in your feedback on that. Thanks.
Yeah, that's a great question, Taylor. Here's the thing. Our LinkedIn's are also, part of our professional brand, right? Um, my company every once in a while will say, "Hey, can you reshare? We're going to be at this conference. Can you reshare this?" I don't have any problems with that. Or let's say we got picked up in a Forbes article and marketing is in Slack saying, "Hey, everybody, can you share on LinkedIn this blurb? Like, we're so happy that we've been picked up on Forbes," right? I have no problem with that. Also, I will have folks in my network who will say, "Hey, would you share something on my behalf? Because I want to get some eyes on it. I'll write a blurb for you." Sure. I have no problem with that. Now, where it's a little wishy-washy for me is if there is somebody who has, the company writing all of their content and they're reposting it as it's theirs. Like, I get it, business is business. If you're the CEO of a company and you have a full staff of writers, kudos to you that you can afford that. I know there are people out there that have that, and have people that will write their content on their behalf. Um, I just personally prefer to do that on my own. But each to their own. So if they do, I don't hold it against anyone. But my preference is to do my own and to be as authentic as I can. Taylor, I don't know if that answers the question, but that's kind of my thoughts and the buckets I put things in.
Yeah, I love that. Um, Next question. Do you have any suggestions for re-engaging an existing network for a job search?
So re-engaging an existing network so I'm assuming what Nicole is meaning is they had a network and haven't been engaging with it and now want to re-engage it to help with the job search. Like, it's a little difficult. I'm not saying it's impossible, right? And that's why one of my tips I called out was invest in it before you need it. And that's why I think it's crucial that we all carve out a little bit of time during the week to definitely invest in that network. So in the event that any of us are impacted by a layoff or need to be looking for our next role, we already have that in mind. But Nicole, I would say it's not impossible. Um, I would, if I were in a position to where I needed to re-engage, I would write off saying, "Hey, I know we haven't spoken a while. I just want to tell you I've always appreciated our relationship or the content you've put out," right? Like, be authentic and tell them why you've appreciated or what you've appreciated and say, I am in the market for my next role. Here's what I'm looking for. If you've heard of anyone that is looking for this, please definitely keep me in mind. Um, I would start there. One of the things that I see happen a lot, and it happens a lot to me, is I will have people that I've never interacted with reach out to me and ask me to introduce them to somebody that I know or somebody I'm connected with. It is a really tall order, and I'm not saying impossible, but to ask somebody that you don't know to put their name on you to reach out to their network. And that's also why it's important to be continuously investing. I have no problem putting my name on folks that I've interacted with for a while, that I've seen, or read or heard some of their thoughts and strategies. But if it's just completely out of the blue, it makes it a little bit harder because now I'm putting my professional name as well on these individuals as I reach out on their behalf. So, um, just my 2 cents there. And Nicole, I would just rip that Band-Aid off and start reaching back out and start re-engaging the network. There's no time like today than to do it. So,
Yes, I love that. The present is great. Okay, next question. Have any of your LinkedIn posts been referenced in an interview by the interviewer? If so, how was your posting activity beneficial in the conversation?
that's really funny that you asked that, Dan. I have a full interview guideline that I have published, and I published it first, I think, in 2015. I think I rewrote it in 2017 and then maybe republished it a couple years ago. And I've had multiple interview candidates who have told me they found my interview guideline online and completely knew what to expect when interviewing with me. And I was impressed. I think, especially in CS roles, we have to be naturally curious and be investigators, um, especially like when we're trying to learn about our customers, who they are as people, what motivates them. Like, I find that extra step to be impressive and beneficial, uh, because it's like building that rapport quick, right out of the gate. So it, I think it's always beneficial if an interviewer can say, "Hey, I have done my research, and I really liked this one post that you made about this," and come with an anecdote as to why. It doesn't feel stalkerish. I know some people worry about that because if you have somebody you're interviewing with that's putting themselves out there publicly like that, they're anticipating that you will go out and do your research and you may see something like that. So I don't know if that's helpful, Dan, but um, I say yes all the way, do it.
Miranda, I think he was also asking about the opposite, right? So if he's
Oh,
interviewing, no, I actually think what you just provided is amazing advice,
okay.
interview advice in general. But I think he was asking if he's interviewing and he's posting content, if that's
Okay.
referenced in the interview as well.
Okay. Okay. So I have. Um, Here's the thing I want to give everybody some advice on. If you are out there and you're putting yourself out there very publicly, there will be larger companies that may not like that. I just want to call that out. Um, so just be mindful of what you're putting out there and how you are presenting yourself professionally. I know of a couple companies that but, as a matter of fact, I believe Zoom is one itself. We're all sitting here on Zoom, that frowns upon having their team members put themselves out there too much publicly. Uh, Not all companies will, not all companies do, but just be mindful when you're putting stuff out there about yourself that if you are putting out things around your personal views, your political views, anything like that, it can be found, and it can be leveraged sometimes for you or against you. That is definitely something to be mindful of. I have had folks that I've personally interviewed with in my roles say, "Hey, saw your content, love it," right? Um, try to be very careful about towing lines, sharing a lot of myself, but not sharing too much of myself that potential companies look at me and say, is she going to be so focused on, her network that she's not going to be able to do the role? So it's just, you got to find that balance if I'm being real about it.
That is amazing advice. I love the call out. Thank you, Miranda. I think that
Yeah.
was really, really helpful. Hope both sides of that was helpful, Dan.
Huh.
I actually think that I think the first question you answered was extremely beneficial. And I don't think a lot of people look at interviewers' content. And I
Yeah.
think that's something that people should do, right? So when you're doing your research, we highly recommend doing your research before any interview. We definitely say look at your LinkedIn, right? But like digging into more what their posts are, where they went to school, what they like to talk about, I think definitely shows a level of detail that everyone just doesn't do. So I
Yes.
think that was phenomenal advice. And I actually think that we should definitely, as recruiters, as a firm, we should say that more to our candidates.
Yeah. And I'm sorry I read it wrong first, but I'm happy it all worked out.
No, anything you say, Miranda, is gold.
Yeah.
I really don't think I really don't think
Will
any of
you
that.
tell my husband that?
Yeah,
Sorry.
that's later this evening when we get drinks, but I'm kidding. Um, okay, so next question. How effective do you think InMail is in connecting, or do you think it might be seen as a little spammy?
Okay. Before 2023, I would have had a different answer than I do now. Before 2023, I had many folks come in through my in-mail when I was hiring saying, hey, I'm really interested in this role and this is why. Because the talent market was so tight, it was gold. It was like gold landing in my inbox. Now, because the market is on fire, I get a stupid amount of messages in my inbox, and it's just hard. I don't know if I view it as spammy, more as like overwhelming, quite frankly. So my advice to folks is don't not in mail, just be super cognizant that if somebody is hiring, they're probably right now being just blasted. Swati, I don't know if you remember this, but I think it was like October of last year, I posted for a CSM renewals manager type
Mhm.
role. And I had within like 3 or 4 hours, I had something like 1,500 applicants and I had to take it
Yeah.
down.
Mhm.
And then my inbox, I'm not exaggerating, hundreds of messages in my inbox. Some were in mail, some were direct messages. And I was trying hard to reply to every one of them. And I finally had to stop and just write a post and say, I'm really sorry. I can't get to all of you. Um, so, I just want everybody to keep in mind when you're thinking about in mailing, just know what's going on in the climate, what's going on in the market, and make sure you're aware of it and write to a tone that acknowledges that like stuff's on fire a little bit, and it might be hard to get back. Not to mention, a lot of companies have reduced staffing, so everybody's just busier in general, and have a lot less free time. So I say do it, but just do it well.
Yeah, no, I love that advice. I think being really thoughtful, and we highly recommend only doing that for jobs like you're really excited about, you feel really qualified for, not doing that for every single position that you're applying for. So really using it as a way to stand out. Uh,
Yeah, I just also want to say that I have been in the position that a lot of folks are in right now. I was a young single mom. I was laid off from my job before I get it. Like I was living paycheck to paycheck, and then I woke up and I'm like, I don't have a job, right? And it's like, okay, unemployment is a joke. It's not going to really cover much. Um, like I know that feeling that a lot of folks are going through, like, how am I going to pay my rent, my mortgage, feed my kids? Like I get it. And then that kind of energy can take over. So I just want to acknowledge that reality, but also say, be mindful in the same way you did, Swati.
yeah, I think that's a really, really good advice. Um, okay. How effective do you think oh, I
It's the
apologize.
same.
I think this was the same. Sorry.
This one's
Okay,
is how
next
effective
one.
do you think LinkedIn in mail is connecting or seen as spammy
Oh, it's
or
the same. It's the
same?
same one.
Yep.
Like, okay, so are there ways that someone new to an industry can write about their learning process without coming off as an expert, as you shared in your presentation? Can they still be valuable and have authentic digital presence?
Absolutely. But just write it with that voice, right? Just write it with, I just transitioned from sales to CS and I wanted to share my early experiences, or I just got my first tech support engineering role, and over the next 6 weeks, once a week, I'm going to share my top 5 learnings, right? Um, there is a way to write it in the voice appropriate for the level of experience you have while like being super helpful to folks. People appreciate that. Um, Also, people want to be able to relate to people. And I know, like, I have folks that I follow on LinkedIn that I'm like, oh my God, they're so amazing. I would love to be like them when I grow up, but I don't feel like I could ever reach out to them. So having folks that are writing from a lens that you're in the same spot that they are, or you're in the same spot that they will be,
Mhm.
makes you more approachable, and people will want to watch and see what you're doing. So it's 100%. valuable, it's still authentic to who you are, and it makes you an expert in what you're going through in that moment as you grow your expertise in that field. So,
Yeah, I love that question. Thank you for whoever asked that. Thank you so much. So I have more questions. Please, if you have more questions in the Q&A, please put them. I'm going to kind of go back to a couple questions I have now. So what I was wondering was, can you share a challenge you faced in managing your digital presence and how you overcame it?
um, well, one, I talked about it a little bit. It's overcoming that mental hurdle that everything you write has to like go viral or be on fire or get a bazillion likes. That was really early, like when I started
Yeah.
doing this in 20, like that was like 10 years ago. Um, one, I think being in my 40s kind of helped, because it's really wonderful being in your 40s for those that haven't made it yet. Like you really care a lot less about what people think about you. It's so freeing. So I'm just sort of, kind of joking, but kind of not joking. But two, I had to recenter myself. I talked about this earlier around my why. Um, my why isn't to get the most likes. My why is to make sure that I'm helping at minimum one person. And if I'm helping one person, I'm happy with it. And also, my why is to build my own portfolio. Even if nobody else sees it, it's mine. This is my portfolio. This is my online resume. This is who I am. This is a representation of my body of work, some of it, I should say, um, and something that I can bring with me and keep with me forever. The LinkedIn recommendations, I take those very seriously. I give recommendations for people who I've worked directly with as much as I can. I also always appreciate it, like when former team members write my LinkedIn recommendations. And like all of this stuff is like, I take it with me from company to company and I use it as, like kind of my portfolio for future opportunities. So
Yeah, I love that. It's almost like a collection of your professional, kind of like your professional kudos is all on LinkedIn, and your trajectory is all on there. I mean, I think in
yeah,
a way, if people wanted to see your history and kind of how you build your presence, they probably could.
absolutely. You can just go
Yeah.
and click on my post and my articles. I have tons of articles in there. You can go in my post and you just scroll back. It's going to take you forever. But um, yeah, you could go back probably, 10 years and see how it just slowly ramped up over
Yeah,
the years.
yeah, that's amazing. I love that. Thank you for sharing. How do you navigate the evolving landscape of online communication to stay relevant and impactful, right? It's changing so much. The algorithms are changing, content is changing, what's important is changing. So how do you kind of navigate that?
Sometimes I just feel old and I don't. Like, like people asking me for my opinions on um, AI, and I'm like, I know I need to have an opinion on AI, and I know I need to get myself more familiar with AI, so I'm starting to go down that path. Um, but back to the question, I haven't really ever been one that's focused on trends. Fuzzy flew through the air. I haven't ever been one that's focused on trends too much. Um, to be honest, I'm probably the worst person to ask about this, but I just try to make sure I think about the way folks around me learn and make sure that I'm hitting the different learning styles, right? So some people are visual learners, some people like to listen, some people like to read. It's not me keeping up on a trend, so to say, but it's me thinking about the content I will put out and how I'll put it out. Now, I will say one trend I did hop on early on was the Canva trend. I don't know if you remember, for a while there, everybody and their brother and sister, they were doing infographics. And I thought, okay, in order for me to be relevant, I have to do infographics. So I went and I got myself a premium Canva, subscription, and I started making infographics, and I have a bunch of them still floating around. It wasn't true to me and who I was. I will still create an infographic now and then, but I find my comfort is more like, short blurb, a few bullet points, another blurb, voila. So.
Yeah. No, I love that. I think staying true to who you are, researching things that you want to make sure you have an opinion on when needed, right? I think this is fantastic advice. I'm also not a huge infographic person, but it's something that I am working on. So um, I get that. I totally get that. Um, this is a really interesting one that I wanted to touch on. Can you discuss a moment where effective digital communication played a key role in resolving professional conflict or misunderstanding?
I honestly don't know if I have any juicy stories here. Um, Sorry. It's a great question. The only thing I can think of is having maybe conflicting opinions on something, and maybe going back and forth and banter in comments with somebody, and then ending up getting on Zoom to have a more in-depth conversation and building a relationship with people out of
Oh,
that.
that's
Like,
fantastic.
but they I think a lot of people shy away from having, contrary opinions, and I've never been somebody who does, but I also am not somebody who's a right fighter and out seeking to pound my opinion down people's throats, so this is probably a question again that I can't bring a lot of juice to.
No, no,
So
that's great advice, though. I think what I love from that is that you will take it offline and you will have that conversation offline and make sure that everyone, well, including you and the relationships you've built, like feel good about what you're posting and the conversation. And I think that really attests to what you're saying about building those relationships and continuing them, right? It's all just like a circle. And I love that. That was super helpful. And I don't know if you have other, if you do a lot of other different digital platforms, but I guess my first question is, do you do other digital platforms? And then how do you remain like consistent across them if you do?
yes, I do other digital platforms. I have, um, look, I have an Instagram for my dog. So, and I'm pretty excited. One of my dogs walking across the water on the sidewalk has 400,000 views, and we can't figure out why.
Wow.
And I also have like an Instagram for my travel. It's about really building habits. I don't have any other professional platforms that I use beyond LinkedIn, but for me, it's all about building a habit, right? It's like every Sunday, I try to do a Sunday reminder. It's usually something about building leadership or confidence or mental health balance, right? It has become a habit. And that's the only advice I can offer to people is if you're going to do things, especially, try to build out your online presence, just make it a habit, make it part of your day to day.
Yeah, I love that. Consistency is key.
It is,
Consistency is
definitely
key.
is.
Okay. How can individuals leverage their online presence to showcase to showcase expertise, obviously, but also connect with other people, with like-minded people, right? Is it, using hashtags, is it tagging certain communities? Like, how would you recommend doing that?
I have mixed feelings about going out and tagging like 50 people on your post because it could actually hurt you. I'm just going to call that out. I do see some people use it as a strategy, but the LinkedIn algorithms, if you tag people and they don't immediately start interacting with it, it could deprioritize it in the algorithms. At least that's what I've read. So I think it's okay if you want to get some folks' opinions to tag them, knowing that if they will interact with it or they're okay with that. But beyond that, I'm not sure I have too much more to offer. I am not a hashtagger. You'll see every once in a while I'll throw in a hashtag startups or hashtag customer success. Would it increase my views? Probably, but again, I'm more centered around helping a few people than getting more views or getting
Yeah.
more interactions.
Okay, awesome. Thank you.
Yeah.
And how do you adapt your digital communication style to resonate with diverse audiences and demographics, right? You talked about different learning styles, um, different using different graphics, stories, anything else that that we can kind of take away.
I mean, I am a woman in tech. So I represent like that part of the equation. I was a single mom for 10 years until I met my husband. I can, be a bit of a representation there. I grew up in poverty. I can, resonate with some folks there. But beyond that, I don't try to pretend that um, I am somebody who's representing, underrepresented communities online outside of the women in tech. So like my lens is generally from who are the communities that I know and I can serve. Now, I do hope I can serve all communities and help all communities, but I wouldn't say it's a deliberate part of my strategy. And I try to help as many as I can, but also stick to what I know.
Yeah, I love that. I think that's really, really good advice. Thank you. And I'm gonna ask you two more questions. So can you share an example of a networking opportunity or collaboration that originated from your online activities?
I mean, probably speaking at the customer conference in London. Um,
Oh, okay.
so they found me online and then I was the opening keynote in Tel Aviv. Um,
Wow, that's amazing.
Yep. So I think those are two really great examples of somebody finding me online through my content and inviting me to speak. And it's happened quite a few times where people will see my content and ask me if I'll join them on their webinar, like you and I, or speak at their conference, or, join their mentor programs. So,
I love that. Thank you so much. I mean, this was all amazing. I think the last thing I wanted to ask you, anything that I obviously we didn't talk about today, or any other final nuggets or advice that you want to share about this topic? I mean, you've given us so many great stories and examples and personal moments, and we can't thank you enough. But I guess that's
yeah,
the last question.
honestly, I can't think of anything that we didn't cover. I think this was very thorough.
Yes.
Um, but I will tell folks to don't be a stranger. Feel free to reach out on LinkedIn. If we're not already connected, connect with me. Um, and keep in touch. I saw some very familiar names. And example is Sean, who's in the audience right now. And Mike Ferry. Like I know them through LinkedIn. And Sean, I feel like I've known forever, right? So that's
Thank
the
you
only
so
thing.
much. Thank you so much. I mean, it's a testament that people that you met online are here today listening to you talk about your online presence. I think that totally comes full circle. Thank you so much for your time today, for your expertise, for your stories. Miranda, we're so thankful to have you today. This will be on our YouTube channel the next few days. So if you've missed it or you want to share it with somebody, please take this. It's so valuable, and I know I'll be using it the whole year. Thank you so much, Miranda.
Thank
We really
you.
appreciate everyone's time today. Come to our next Communication Part 3 webinar on March 7th. It's going to be about storytelling. So we're really excited about digging into that topic. And Miranda, once again, thank you so much for being here today and for your time. I know you've had a crazy travel week, and we really appreciate you being here today. Thank you, everyone. Thanks for listening and thanks for your questions. See you next
Thank you.
time.
Take care. Bye.